Give that a second. And remember, you're free to say what you want to say. No restrictions here.
Thank you, Jesus.
All right, it's recording, so off you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. I just want to mention, like, if you hear some really weird noises, I have a chihuahua that got like some kennel coughing and doesn't stop coughing. Instead of dying, he keeps coughing. So really, really annoying.
I thought it might be a bear or something.
Yeah, so just want to mention that. It's not me, doing these weird noises. It's the dog. Okay, so let's take a look at what I have. I don't want to spend like too much time on the presentation itself. Like, of course I will explain the whole thing, the whole idea, where we came from and where we are at. But, I want to have some time to answer any questions. And more than that, like to have a discussion with everyone about large scale AVD. So
cool.
let's go.
I just realised that I've not done the introduction. So
go ahead.
I'll just do a quick intro to you guys. So obviously, welcome to the UK Azure Virtual Desktop User Group. So as I mentioned before, we're doing things a bit different slightly. So Claudio needs to get away at 2, so we're going to do his presentation first, and then we'll do sort of the intros and rest stuff later. So I don't know if you've ever seen Claudio present before. He's a very, very good presenter, bit of an industry legend. So and he's going to talk to us tonight about sort of large-scale AVD deployment that he's done. So over to you, Claudio.
Cool. Okay, well, just here, like a shameless plug, of course, I have to do that. If you haven't seen the DAS, the complete guidebook, it's on Amazon. It's really, really cool. It's available now. I mean, like right now, you can go and buy it. And trust me, it's the best shite ever. I tried my Irish, Scottish accent here, but of course I failed. But anyhow, it's a good book. Just take a look and let me know what you think, okay? If you have any comments, concerns, want to complain, you can always find me on Twitter or just email me. Okay, so what is the agenda for this? Just a very quick introduction about what the project was, basically. And then take a very quick look at what the environment looked like or looks like as of today, like no, the diagrams or anything like that. If you want more information, of course, I can definitely share, but I just didn't want to like bring all these diagrams and details into a quick presentation. So again, we have more time to discuss, to talk about it than, seeing slides here. And then the design, how did we come up with the design, what it looks like. And of course, with AVD, if you are doing AVD, you have no challenges. You are lying to yourself or to your company, because there are challenges with AVD. We all know that, right? So that's pretty much what we're going to cover. Okay, so a quick introduction. This was an environment for healthcare, not in Canada, in the US. This is a large healthcare provider in the United States. And we ended up with around 5,500 VMs running this particular environment. So just to give you an idea of the size here, okay? And it was like a kind of like a joint effort between us, like the internal team at the company, and the Microsoft global black belt guys that are now call it something else, because as far as I know, they don't exist any longer, or they're gonna bring them back as something else. But again, it's their GBB team that was part of this with us. So in other words, it has the Microsoft input and blessing in a way, but not necessarily from the AVD team, but from the people doing the real work with customers, okay? So that there is a difference, and I want to highlight that. because sometimes the AVD people, they are disconnected from the real world. So what they suggest normally doesn't match what you see or what you need with the real customers. So keep that in mind as well as the first lesson learned here. On the environment side, okay, let's take a look at some of the details, okay? Some quick facts here. First, there was, of course, a persistent side on this particular case for several reasons, and I will explain these. And on the persistent side, we had around 4,000 users, what means 4,000 VMs, one-to-one assignment here. And the size, just to give you an idea, I would say probably 95% of the VMs were 4 CPU, 16 gigs. There may be some that are like smaller instances for, whatever reason, like punishing certain users. And there are certain VMs that are larger, like some crazy demanding developers. So some users may have like an 832. But again, the vast majority is 416, okay? And then there is a pooled side, of course, a non-persistent. So in that case, it is a multi-user. So Windows 10 multi-user here. And we have around 3,500 users on that. And the typical, the actual VM size that is being used is a D8S. So 8 gigs, 32, 8 CPUs, 32 gigs of RAM. And again, the need here for the persistent, to give you some background and some, history here. This was a migration. So the customer was originally a VMware Horizon on-prem customer. Like this was a Horizon environment at the end of the day, running, of course, on ESX, vCenter, and all that stuff. And then for whatever reason, I don't know the exact reason because I joined it later, but it was decided they were going to do everything on Windows Virtual Desktop, because that was the name back in the day when we started this. Now, the question is, why they decided, first, it was to be Azure. Now, why they did not go with the VMware Horizon Cloud? That's another question I have no answer for. And the reason why I'm throwing this here is after like writing the book and going through all these solutions, I like all solutions. I think each one has, its pros and cons. And I'm talking about AVD, of course, here as well. But the thing is, as you're going to see during the presentation, AVD, especially for large scale, it does lack a lot of stuff. If we're doing like a couple hundred users, I don't know, maybe, less than 100 VMs, because that's usually the case. Like if you look at most of the deployments, even if they are in the like 1,000 users, a ton of people are doing multi-user. I don't have the exact numbers, but Neil, for example, and Baz, from Nerdio, that are tying to AVD, they probably know that. Just looking at their customers, I would say, and Neil, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would say the vast majority of the Nerdio customers are doing multi-user, right?
Yeah, that is correct. We do have some single session users, but I would say probably 85% of the customers multi-user desktops.
Yeah, so again, the vast majority goes for multi-user. And, the thing is, certain products, when you look at pricing, for example, and AVD by itself, again, large scale, it is problematic for several reasons that we're going to discuss. But then you are like, okay, I understand. There is a problem. How do I fix? Well, like any problem with the cloud, you just throw more money and you fix the cloud problems, right? So that's how it works. So here you have to bring something else, like, okay, what can I do for, I don't know, my applications? Because, you know, app attach has its own set of problems as well. And again, if you are doing 5-10 apps, it's one thing. If you are doing 1,000 apps and having to deal with all that, it's a completely different beast, especially with like thousands and thousands of VMs and thousands of users. So the lesson is you end up throwing more money. And in this particular case, why I'm mentioning Horizon Cloud? Well, first, because the customer was already a Horizon customer. So they had the skill sets, right? Even though you are going from on-prem to the cloud, and of course there are differences, it's in a certain way like going from Citrix on-prem to Citrix cloud, you know? Certain things are different, certain things look different, but they are very similar. So you can transfer that skill set in an easier way than going from, you know, something to something completely new. And again, when you add the cost of all the extra solutions you may need to get AVD up and running, in certain cases like this one, for me, it would make more sense to simply keep on the VMware, you know, track. Just keep going, just keep using the same product. But again, for whatever reason that is unknown to me, they didn't wanna, and then they decided to go AVD, probably because they thought, well, we can do everything with AVD, and they may have called someone in, you know, in Redmond on the AVD team. Oh, can we do that? Oh yeah, we can do everything. Well, then, you know, reality check. Well, we can't. So now we need to bring all these extras. So again, I don't know the whole history here, but I know we ended up with, okay, here's AVD, make it work. So just for
So
you to understand.
I know I've spoken to a few customers who, and most customers speak to around Horizon says who go to AVD said because of the cost. Because I don't know off the top of my head how much it is for Horizon license, but it's not cheap, is it? Do you know how much it is?
From what I remember, but again, here's the deal, and that's an important thing, right? If you look at AVD, plain AVD compared to Horizon, it's like comparing no cost, you know, like the AVD, you're just paying for the computer. And of course, you're going to pay that if you throw something on top of AVD. So forget about the costs with AVD itself. But if you are licensed and all that stuff, well, then there is no cost, no extra cost. You're just paying for the Azure consumption. But now, if because of issues with AVD, and again, it will get down to size really. But when you go big, you are going to have to do something. You are going to have to bring something. I'm still to see a customer that runs like multiple thousand VMs with AVD and did bring nothing. It's doing plain AVD. If they are doing, I'm not saying these customers do not exist. They probably exist, but you have to keep in mind, you know, some people, they hate themselves, they want to kill themselves on a daily basis. Well, that's when you go and do large scale AVD with AVD only. So, you know, if you want to suffer, I can't fix that. So there are companies that like to suffer and IT people that like to suffer even more than the companies. Well, then, yeah, do AVD on its own for big companies. But again, the cost is, yes, Neil, when we are comparing one against zero cost, yes, there is a cost and potentially a large cost. But I think the numbers were like $16 or $8. It gets down to single digits with Horizon Cloud. So again, when you consider that you may need a solution to deal with the applications like I don't know, cloud paging, or a solution to deal with something else, you know, with the scaling. Well, when you add up all these extra solutions, it may be actually more money than just running Horizon Cloud. So again, yes, there is a cost. And if you compare bare bones to Horizon Cloud, yes, it will be more money. In some cases, substantial more money. But in many cases, that may not be the case. So yes, there is a cost, but again, keep in mind, cost varies from customer to customer, how many licenses you need, what else you're going to throw into the environment, and so on. So these are the quick facts about the environment. Now the design, okay? And again, this was an effort that we spent quite a bit of time, on meetings with Microsoft and trying to nail down everything that you could imagine. And we, as a team, we decided that would be the best design for this particular case. Of course, a lot of that should, be able to be applied to any kind of AVD of this size, but you may have to tweak something here and there to better match your environment, right? But again, this should be a pretty good like foundation in terms of a solid AVD design. And keep in mind, I'm not going to go into, there is, of course, the Azure foundation here, hub and spoke and all that stuff, and NVAs. And well, that's not the point here. This is the layer above. That's the AVD side. The Azure side, there was, a separate design just for that. So some of the details on the persistent side first. Host pools. The way this was done, first, multiple subscriptions. And I will explain the reason why you break it up into multiple everything. But again, multiple subscriptions here. For each subscription, we threw 5 host pools. On each host pool, 200 VMs. So now we have, in one subscription, we have 1,000 VMs. So pretty, good size. And the other key thing here is, again, we are looking at the persistent, right? And why normally we use persistent? Because first, users need, their own desktop, and normally they need their own desktop because they have something that is unique to them. So in this case, these 4,000 users, there was like looking at the desktops, they are definitely quite different, like from user to user. Of course, there is a common image, with your common apps, whatever, like Office 365 and some core apps. But then there is a ton of like differences between user to user because of like development tools or the team the user is on. Like it's quite different. And what that creates is when we talk about host pools on AVD and we have the validation host pools, when you have such a difference between host pools, because again, the workloads are very different. Even within the same host pool, you look at a particular user, he may be completely different than, the like other 50 users. So in this case, the point is you have to have pretty much, one host pool that you throw all kinds of different workloads there, and you make that whole thing with a ton of users a validation host pool. Because if you just get the same subset of users, so let's say my persistent users, I have users in finance, users on technical side like IT, users on marketing. If you create one host pool for, let's say, marketing, and you set something like that as validation, well, if there is something that breaks when Microsoft updates that, and it breaks, doesn't break marketing, for example, it doesn't mean it will not break IT. It doesn't mean it will not break finance. So what I'm saying here is, ideally, you want to mix, in this persistent case, you want to mix all types of users into a host pool, into a validation host pool. And if that one, if takes an update, you are going to be able to see better if that update breaks a much bigger audience, a much bigger, amount of different user types than trying to stick, all marketing in one, all finance in another, and so on. So again, try to bring as much different workloads as you can into validation host pools. So if shit breaks, you can see right away. oh, it broke marketing, but didn't break IT, for example. Otherwise, again, if you stick to very, very similar workloads into one validation host pools, it doesn't mean it will not break something else. And as you know, Microsoft doesn't tell you for how long it's going to stay as validation, when it's going to be rolled out to the other host pools. You have no control as of today on that as well. So again, that's why it's very important to have a very, very mixed, like a big mix of different workloads on the validation host pool. So that's the host pool side. Oh, and the main reason for the multiple subscriptions and these 1,000 VMs per subscription, if you will, at the end of the day, it has to do with, for example, API limits on the Azure side. And you're going to see where that will be a problem. I'll mention that later. Now, on the regions, it is a multi-region design, okay? And what that means was, as this is still a hybrid environment, and why it's a hybrid environment? Well, because, for example, there is a lot of stuff on this particular customer that does not run on Windows, you know, AS400 or whatever it is. So all these things are still running on-prem as of today. So there is a lot of stuff on-prem, you know, servers that users need access to, or data that users need access to, and so on. So what happens here is you are connecting your on-prem environment to different regions. And then you select regions that offer similar latency. You know, there is an Azure website, not from Microsoft, but from a person that developed this tool. So you can go and check the latency from your location to all the regions on Azure. So you can select the ones that you want that are closer. So this is the reason here why we selected two regions where the latency was very, very similar. And multi-region, well, why multi-region? Well, if one region goes kaboom, then we have the other region. It's the same reason why when you select a region with availability zones, for example, you spread your workloads on multiple zones. So if one data center goes kaboom, you don't bring the whole environment down. So here was the main reason was this one, you know, high availability, but also it ties into DR. And I will explain the DR side because it's an interesting one. You know, when you have a small environment and you have to deal with DR, it's one problem. When you have a really big environment and you have to deal with DR, it's a completely different problem, completely different approach. And you see some stuff that is quite you know, interesting and makes you realize that, oh, I don't want to be in DR, you know, in a situation where I have to fail over something. And I'll explain the kind of stuff that we saw. And again, I mentioned that if there is a availability zone on a particular region, use it. In our case, the two regions, one has, one doesn't have as of today. And then the storage side, it's kind of the same in terms of availability as well. But what we did was we used one storage account per host pool, and then LRS or ZRS. And why one or the other? Well, again, because there are regions where you can get ZRS, there are places where you cannot. So in that case, if there was no ZRS, well, it was LRS. If there was ZRS, it was ZRS. One large file share is standard, okay? Standard, no need for anything better in this particular case. Of course, it's a standard that you have to enable the large, you know, file share. But again, it's a large file share per host pool. And it was a single FSLogix container. So in this particular case, for the persistent, well, for both, it was a single. The thing is, as it's persistent, anything that was Office, like boom, it is stayed, it remained on the local C drive. because again, it's persistent. It's one-to-one assignment. The user will always connect to that particular desktop, and whatever office is caching, again, it's cache. So if I lose my cache, well, who cares? Next time, if something happens with the desktop and I have to give the user a new desktop, he gets a new desktop, all the office caching crap goes back into the C drive, and that's it. He doesn't lose any data per se. Is that clear? All good?
Yep.
Okay, so let's take a look at the non-persistent side. The non-persistent was a little bit different, and we had some discussions with Microsoft on certain things. But the ideas remain the same. Multiple subscriptions, 5 host pools. The difference is now, instead of having 200 VMs, we are down to 50 VMs per host pool. And the reason is tied to density. We assumed and tested for the performance and applications that these people are running a 4-to-1 ratio here, okay? Meaning 4 users per VM. So 4 users per VM, 50 VMs per host pool. I end up with 200 VMs, 200 users per host pool times 5 host pools. I end up with the same 1,000 users, like 5 host pools per subscription. I end up with the same 1,000 users, on that environment, for that for the subscription. Then as we have 4,000, close to 4,000 times 4, so you get the 4,000 users. Same idea, multi-region, of course. Latency, that's how you select. If AZ available, use it. The difference here is, and that's something that Microsoft has 2 different approaches. I prefer the approach we selected here, even though it complicates things a little bit. When you go and create the host pools and you start bringing your session hosts to the host pools, here we are spreading the hosts across, it's a cross-region host pool, if you will. So I have session hosts that are on region 1, and I have session hosts that are on region 2. The reason for that is to give the user a single icon. So the user sees a single icon, he double clicks on the icon, and then he goes to one of the 2 regions. The latency is the same from the region to the on-prem data, if you will. So it doesn't matter really from a performance standpoint where the user ends up landing, but simplifies access, because Microsoft, if you see their design, they suggest you can do like 2 icons. One goes to region 1. The host pool is exclusively on region 1. The other one, the host pool only has hosts on region 2. But now I have 2 icons for the user. And then you have to tell the user, always click icon number 1. And if shit happens, then you click icon number 2. The problem becomes, first, do you trust the user? I like users, that's why we all have jobs, but I don't trust them. It doesn't mean, I like them, but I don't trust them. It's like my kids. I like my kids, but I don't necessarily trust my kids sometimes. So same idea applies here. And the other problem is, what defines shit hits the fan? Well, the user may be at home, working from home, like everyone is, is doing these days. And then the user is in the kitchen. Someone turns on the microwave 2 seconds before he clicked on the icon that I always told him to click, icon number 1. And then the microwave is screwing up his Wi-Fi, and now, oh shit, this AVD garbage, it's not working again. And then he's like, yeah, Claudio told me, to click icon number 2 if shit hits the fan. And then he's clicking icon number 2. Well, shit didn't hit the fan. It was your microwave. But now he thinks it's a problem with AVD. So now he's on the other side of the pond. So that kind of problem, like how to control that, how to tell the users what is a real failure versus his own home issues with his microwave. Well, there is no easy way to do that. So that's why we decided to go with the single icon approach. You double click, you may one day go to region 1, or next day you go to region 2. And then, of course, we handle the profile side of the house in a way that both regions are, they have replicated profiles using whatever technology, in our case, Cloud Cache, and off you go. It works. That brings us to the storage side. Same idea, one storage account per host pool, large file, standard, single FSLogix container, same everything. The only difference is, in this particular case, the Office stuff ends up into the container, except Microsoft Teams. Unless you want to give your users like 1 terabyte containers, then you leave Teams on the container. But if you want to reduce the size from like 1 terabyte to something like 1 gig, then you remove Teams. Then don't ask me what Teams does in the container, because I have no idea how something can cache so much garbage, but it does. The other thing that I want to mention is the 1,000 VMs, for example, that I mentioned it on the persistent side. If you use Azure NetApp for the storage, there are some limitations around that as well. Like, you cannot have more than 1,000 IPs, in other words, 1,000 VMs in this particular case, connecting. Otherwise, you run into problems. It is a limitation. So that was one of the reasons. But again, the other one is tied to API limits. So some quick comparison between the persistent and non-persistent. Well, disks, of course, it's ephemeral disks on non-persistent. So you are leveraging the disks that are on the actual hosts, the Azure hosts running your workloads, to save on costs and to give you the best performance possible. And Nerdio supports that. So just, a plug for Nerdio here. And the regions, again, I already mentioned that we are spreading out the session hosts across multiple regions for the same host pool for the single icon approach. Storage, that's one of the complications. Now, when I have a host pool, I have all my hosts there, I can go and create a policy and I set, FSLogix. And Neil, I think that's, something that I don't know if it's available on Nerdio as of now, but if
yes,
it's not,
it is.
But the configuration, I can tell half of my host pool goes with one FSLogix configuration, and the other half goes with a different one. Is that available now?
No, it's only on a per host pool basis.
Okay, because in this case, what happens is I have my host pool with hosts on region 1 and hosts on region 2. Region 1, the primary location for the Cloud Cache is the storage location on region 1. And the secondary is on region 2. But on region 2 hosts, it's reversed.
So we do support that. So our very, very latest release, just released, we support DR capability. And when you enable the DR on a host pool, it copies it over to the other region, enables the Cloud Cache, and then it does all that stuff automatically. So when your user goes into the other region, it will automatically read the Cloud Cache FSLogix profile.
Awesome. So again, that's the complication here. Again, hosts on region 1, primary location region 1, secondary region 2, but hosts on region 2, it's reversed. Primary location region 2, secondary location region 1. It's a little bit more work depending on the tool. Again, if it's plain AVD, then you have to deal with policies for different hosts. Again, just a little bit different, but it works and works well. So challenges. Did we have any challenges with AVD at this particular scale? Oh, yes. I didn't lose much hair, but I don't have much hair to start with. But, could have been worse. But again, there are challenges here. So some of the challenges, again, the limits, API limits, for example, if I have a couple hosts, let's say 100 hosts, and I want to reboot everything, Azure can do that. If I have 7,000 hosts or 5,000 or 6,000, and for whatever reason I want to reboot everything at the same time, you can't. There is a limit. Okay, so there is a limit of calls that can be made by something like Nerdo, for example, per hour, per minute. You can't go past that. But now if you have multiple subscriptions and so on, then you are basically tying these limits into that area, into that little pod, if you will. So now you overcome the API limitations because you are doing like multiple subscriptions and so on. UI performance, yeah, it's it's fine when you are trying to find stuff and trying to manage stuff when you have 100 users. When you have 7,000 and you are on the AVD portal and you are trying to find people, you are trying to do all kinds of different things, it is a problem. And keep in mind that over the past year, we have seen problems, bugs on the UI. They were reported and Microsoft, addressed them at a later date, but it wasn't like, we reported today and a week later it's fixed. No, it doesn't work exactly like that with them. So for a while, you're going to suffer. And yes, we suffered. And then there are problems with scalability. And what is the problem with scalability? Well, there are certain things that, for example, one is doing the auto scaling using the AVD solution. And you know what is the proposed AVD solution. That is nasty stuff. You can say whatever you want. Is that an enterprise grade solution? No, it's not. Does it work well with maybe 100 hosts? Probably. Does it work well with 7,000? No, I can tell you it doesn't. So again, scalability in certain areas, it is very, very problematic. And that's where things like Nerdo, for example, come to the picture and they fix all this mess, especially at large scale. So that's one of the problems here. And then the scalability ties into DR, and you're going to understand why. DR is another big problem with large, environments. Again, it's large. If you're trying to, get the Titanic not to hit the iceberg, I don't need to tell you what happened, right? They actually hit the iceberg. They couldn't steer from the iceberg. Well, it's the same thing here. If you're trying to do DR to deal with, a couple VMs, sure, you can do a lot of different things. Azure Site Recovery, whatever, Now, if I'm dealing with thousands and thousands, well, I have a problem. And what are the problems? Well, some of the problems that we have seen, for example, first is capacity. Because again, you're assuming if there is a major disaster, major failure, and you are single region, how do you guarantee I can bring, for example, within an hour, 1,000 VMs, 3,000 VMs up and running? I can have that up and running, within an hour. Is there capacity for that? Is there available capacity? You don't know that. You can only assume there is. But I can tell you it's not that simple, and it's not guaranteed. If you go to Azure right now and you say, oh, I need 5,000 VMs in the next hour, well, it's not going to happen. Now, the other problem is, let's say you start, okay, it's DR, shit hits the fan. I need to recover to the other place, to the other site, to the other region. You started with thousands and thousands of VMs. How long it's going to take? Well, again, it's going to take some time. It's not like, 5 minutes later, everything is flipped. It doesn't work exactly like that. Now, by the time you are done the DR, you know, the flip to the other side, to the other region, to the other whatever, depending on the size of the environment, it takes a lot of time, takes too long. So by the time you are done, well, the other side may be already up and running. So the disaster that was seen on the first site, well, it was already addressed. Or you are in the middle of the DR because it's such a big environment that you are in the middle and then someone, oh, guess what? Site 1 is now good. So it becomes a big problem. So when do you flip? How do you flip? Do I flip? So that's why the multi-region here in kind of like an active form, and I'm talking about AVD specifically here, right? I'm not talking about like the applications these users are running, like the backend, like the SQL stuff. I don't know, you know, that kind of stuff. It's to the application. It's up to the application owner to come up with a DR strategy to tell us how that works, how to flip, and so on. That's more like an infrastructure problem than an AVD problem, of course. But again, I'm talking about the AVD here. If you take a multi-region approach, even in the case of the persistent, like we did, is splitting the users into different regions. Well, if I lose one region, it's persistent. Yes, FS logics, you know, may be gone and the VM is gone. And it was accepted that, well, if we lose a region, at least half of the users are working. Is it a big deal for this particular business? Well, it's not a massive deal. Yes, it is a problem. But I know if a region goes kaboom, I don't lose everything. And I still have the non-persistent side as well that is already multi-region and with the session hosts always spread out. So again, this will simplify your DR. So when shit hits the fan, you have to worry about way less stuff because you know a big chunk of the environment is still up and running, even with a region, a complete region failure. You are now dealing with other fires. Again, like I mentioned, the actual infrastructure, the backend components for applications and so on. But at least your AVD side, it's kind of taken care of. And I prefer that approach because, again, when you are in DR, you have much bigger problems potentially to deal with. So the less you have to flip, the less you have to handle, the better in DR. Okay, and in this case, there is no extra cost because it's not that, you know, we are doing an active passive. Well, it's active. So the users would be consuming this Azure compute regardless. Of course, you know, like we did an exercise here because we had to look at costs. There are little differences in costs, you know, between one region and another. And I can show you guys later if anyone wants to see that. But the difference was like at the end of the day, it was, I think on the persistent use case, it was under 2% difference to go with the multi-region approach. And on the non-persistent, because of course the user density, you know, it's not 1-to-1, it's 4-to-1. So you of course have a much lower cost at the end of the day doing multi-session. And in that case, the little difference there was in money, as the number is lower, the percentage, you know, seemed higher. It was around, I think, 4% higher the cost to do multi-region with the non-persistent. But again, the idea is go multi-region active with AVD to avoid having to deal with flipping a whole AVD environment to another place when time comes. And as I said, I mentioned the deployment pace. I don't know if you guys tested this, but you know, many people, when they come up with their DR plans, they don't actually test a full-blown DR. Like, okay, let me understand. I have 5,000 VMs. I need to flip. How long this shit's gonna take? Will Azure respond like at the same speed every single day? Can I actually create 5,000 VMs within whatever time frame? What is that time frame? Well, it's what the business dictates as acceptable. We have to be back up and running within whatever many hours. Can you do it? Well, we have to test that. So the deployment pace is a problem. Support. Well, we had challenges. There is a reason why there is a sheet icon beside Microsoft Teams, because it is like pure horse shit as of today. And doesn't matter how they mask it, whatever they do to try to make it better. And don't even get me started on the whole WebRTC stuff, because that fixes nothing. Like the amount of problems that I have with that garbage every single day drives me insane. And on a funny note, I don't know if you guys notice it, but I'm seeing this every single day. There is kind of like an unknown, never told relationship between the RD, the AVD agent, the version of the client the user has, and Teams. So sometimes, Microsoft updates the agent and then breaks the AVD media optimization that you see on Microsoft Teams. It breaks. So the user calls us and he's like, oh, now when I launch Teams, it says media not optimized. And then you go check the client. Oh, now there's a client update available. Then we update the client and boom, the problem is gone. And sometimes the problem is still there, but then you quit Team, you kill the damn bastard, and you relaunch it, and boom, the problem is solved. So it's all these like unknowns, really poor experience with Teams that drives most of the users like insane. You probably have seen this. It's nothing new, but I just want to reinforce the idea that the S letter in Teams stands for shit. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Profiles. Well, of course we have profiles issues. Doesn't matter the underlying technology, FS logics, some alien new technology that is gonna come, Microsoft is gonna acquire in the future. Doesn't matter. Profiles, profile issues and cockroach, they will always exist. So we have issues, but now it's more like towards sizing. Users were migrated in this particular case like to OneDrive, then they start copying stuff into the profile, and no one told them, oh, your profile, there is a limit, it's like 50 gigs. And on the limitation, on the size limitation, I want to mention this. What I had to do, I wanted to first look at the Horizon environment, the on-prem. So there is systrack on the environment. I ran something that was able to show me what was the actual profile size on every single Horizon desktop out there. And then I noted that 99% of the users, they would fall under 20 gigs. And there were users, like one user, he was the winner. He had 148 gigs on his profile. So based on that, we decided on a particular size for the fast logics. Like, okay, we're not going to pull this number out of our asses. We are going to look at what is there, and then we're going to decide on a size. So something for you to think about. Don't come up with a number because you read on Slack or somewhere or someone told you. Try to look at what you need, right? And then you come up with the number. The other problem was expected performance. Users, especially if you are telling them, no, your corporate laptop, no, you're not going to use that. You're going to now use AVD. Oh, okay. So for the user, it's like, yeah, I don't care. I just want to run my application, and my application has to work and work the same speed or better than it was running before. The problem is when you bring to Azure, there are issues around data, for example. Where's the data? So in this case, there were tons of users doing Microsoft Access databases. Well, guess what? When you don't move the freaking database to Azure, then you now have to access the database through the express route. Well, it doesn't perform exactly like it was before. So I had users literally telling me, I want my Horizon back. Give me back my Horizon. And I'll kill you if you don't give it back. And I'm like, listen, man, I don't even work on the VMware side. I understand you want your Horizon back, but AVD is the future. It's your future. It may be a dark future, but it is your future. So we had to work around these things. We are now, and that's a Microsoft suggestion here. We came to Microsoft and we are like, listen, there is this problem, right? As you have guessed, we couldn't move everything to Azure. Surprise, we couldn't move all the Unix hosts to Azure and so on. So now I have all this data on-prem. What do you suggest? And then Microsoft is like, oh, we read somewhere that you can actually deploy on-premises host pools. You can't use Windows 10 multi-user, but you can actually deploy other OSs. And I'm like, yeah, I think I read something like that on my own blog, like a year ago, and you guys gave me shit and decided to fight me. But, I'm glad that you are suggesting that. So now this is the real suggestion from Microsoft itself. Deploy on-premises AVD, so So expected performance is a problem. If you're telling the users, well, this is so good, this is fast, and then you load like Carbon Black and 20 other security tools to the point it sucks, well, then you have a problem. You have angry users. So again, keep in mind what the target performance is based on what the users will tell you. Other challenges, well, monitoring, you can monitor certain things with AVD on Azure. But if you want to get to the nitty and gritty details of the EUC side, okay, like how are my profiles performing, size, how much is available, how long are is the logon taking, where is it is low on the logon, like all these things that Azure does not give you, well, then you need something else. So you have this single versus multiple tool, needs now. This particular customer, again, they were on Systrack and they also had Splunk. So they could, if they wanted to pay for, they could go with something like Uber Agent as an example. But the lesson is what is available on Azure only, whatever you get from Azure, it's not enough. You're going to have to bring something else to the environment to be able to get that full overview, full view on what is going on with every single part of the puzzle. Okay. And from the management, as I said, it's fine for small, and there is a reason why we ended up bringing Nerdu, because it sucks to use AVD and Azure Portal with thousands and thousands of users and VMs. So they're just simplified this whole thing a lot, and it's cool to see that they keep releasing new features very, very quickly. It's not like you throw Nerdu in and then you are stuck with version whatever for 6 months. You see stuff happening almost on a weekly basis. There's a public preview of this. Okay, shit, I'm gonna deploy. And then, weeks later, it's GA. And then a couple weeks later, there is already another feature, another preview. So it's really fast-paced, what helps a lot. In terms of data, as I mentioned, before you go and do something like that on AVD, you need to understand where the data is and what can be moved. And if the data actually will have to be accessed by on-premises resources, and Azure, cloud resources. Because, one solution is, well, just move the data to Azure. Yeah, well, that would be great if I can move everything to Azure. But if I still keep users on-prem, then I'm just moving the problem from one place to another. So now I don't have, angry AVD users. Now I have angry on-premises users. So it is a problem. If you're going to be on this hybrid, approach for a while, you are going to have issues. And of course, certain issues with data, you can do like an Azure file sync and whatever solution you want to throw into the problem. But again, not every kind of data, not all types of data will be able to, be addressed by something like Azure file sync. Access databases being one of them. So again, you need to understand where the data is and how is that data used. Otherwise, you're gonna be, going nuts. Just want to mention, the team that worked with me. If you know Yuri Binko from the WVD Global Black Belt team, Robert as well. Great resources, always there for us, and it was fun working with them. And I'm the black sheep, of course. You already know that. At least I'm not completely hated by everyone, but there is some hate out there towards myself. What is cool? I like that. So summary: is it possible without anything? Well, anything is possible. You can build a house, only you going to Home Depot buying, some lumber, and yeah, you can build a house. It'll take forever. It may never be finished. Your wife may kill you, but it's doable. So here it's the same. Can you do AVD at large scale using AVD stuff only? Well, yeah. If you hate yourself, your family, everyone, yes, go for it. But if you have better, things to do with your life and want to keep your hair and probably your health, well, then you better bring other things, right? And as I mentioned, DR, it's something that you really have to think about in large size environments. How it's going to be flipped, how long it's going to take. Do I want to flip everything? Should I, do active? That kind of stuff, it has to be taken into consideration and very, very careful. So that's it. That's all I have to say about this. Again, I have numbers. I have more information, of course, if you need more information. And you can always reach me. My email is on the screen. Some of you guys know me from Twitter. My DMs are always open. So feel free to send me a DM if you feel like it. Or again, just email me. Any questions? I have a couple minutes.
There's some questions in the chat window, Claudio. But cheers for that. So I think the biggest questions that we've got around cost, sort of how do you manage cost on the persistent side? Do you do like reserved instances or using auto scaling to power off and on? How do you manage those?
Well, right now, on the persistent side, of course, we enable we start on connect, so the users can power on their desktops. And then we try to enforce a power off on that, at a certain time that we know it's not 5 p.m. because some users may work longer than that. But we let them know what time we're going to be powering stuff off. And again, if they need to power on later, they can go and do the start on connect and things work on the persistent side. On the non-persistent, well, then now it's being handled by Nerdio. And the reason why now the persistent is not being handled as of now, it's just because we were running a previous version. So now when we upgrade to the greatest and latest Nerdio and all that stuff, then we'll probably switch everything to Nerdio in terms of managing the workloads, the auto scaling.
Cool. Just for your information, as well, on the latest version, we've got a feature where when you actually log off the persistent VM, it'll shut the VM down for you as well. So that's saving you more money.
Yeah.
And another question around the for the VM sizes for the multi-session host, did you say you're getting 4 users to one host, and that host is a D8? Is that right? Let me just get the comment.
Yeah, it's a host with 8 CPUs and 32 gigs.
Right, so it's 4 users onto that host. Okay.
Yeah, but again, how many users can you get? It's like, trying to know the lottery numbers, for tomorrow's draw. It depends. Like, I've seen some customers with way more users per host because of, applications and not using Teams. And I have seen cases, where the number of users per host was very, very low. Just again, because of the applications and the usage pattern, right?
Yeah, we find we get better performance from the E-series VMs. I know Nathan Bird's on. I know he's worked in a large custom environment, and he's seen similar stuff. So you might want to take a look at those E-series. Might get a bit better performance out of them.
Perfect.
Got another question. Some hands up from Najeesh. You can unmute and ask away if Claudio's got time.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Neil. Claudio, good presentation, right? So thoroughly enjoyed it. I have a couple of questions. I faced a similar challenge where the customer was on VMware Horizon View platform. So 2 questions specifically on that. What was the platform which they were basically using for the print, and what did we do on AVD? That's the question number 1. When it comes to profile, you mentioned that they were on VMware Horizon View, and some of the users were basically asking, that they wanted to go back to Horizon. Could you please elaborate a little in terms of what was the reason behind that? That's my second question. And Neil, I did ask about the presentation last time also, but unfortunately I couldn't get it for the last session which I attended. So this time, if we get the recording or the presentation, that will be of great help.
Okay, got it. Okay, so the first one on the printing side, from what I can see, and again, I have been supporting users for some time, on the environment, there is very little need for them to print.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing that I see is they have a standard when there is a need for like printers. It's not like, go to Best Buy and buy whatever printer you want. There is like a standard. They enforce, you want a printer, we're going to give you, whatever model. And in that case, of course, it cuts down a lot of the printing issues because it's like known printers, known drivers. So the easy print or even like a native like driver redirection works fine. In most cases, when we see printing problems, I personally like to use TriStrat with their, screwdrivers solution. But again, some other companies use something different.
The reason why I asked that first question, Claudio, because we are all working remote, and when we are working remote, and if there is a print which is required to be done, and everyone has their own model of printer, so there is a different model of printer all across, and anyone can use any printer, but then it's more of that integration where the problem is. But which product did you mention, Claudio?
Screwdrivers from a company called TriStrat. Screwdrivers is pretty solid.
I'll put the link in the window for you.
Yeah, and you can print from even I remember one time, I always tell that story. I was in New Zealand, 17 hours ahead, and my daughter sends me a message, on WhatsApp that she had to print something and she couldn't she couldn't understand what was going on. And then I'm like, okay, where's the document? And we had it on Dropbox. And I'm in New Zealand using my phone and I go open the document from Dropbox, and I, using Tri-Strats, the screwdrivers, I printed the damn thing from my phone into my HP color laser jet at home.
Oh,
You know, just going from, you know, through the internet, and boom, like she was like, how is that even possible? And I'm like, well, you don't want to know, but you know, the point is she got her file printed at home from New Zealand from a mobile phone.
perfect.
So it's pretty cool solution. Now, why the users wanted their Horizon back? Well, they wanted their Horizon back because of the performance, because they were using on-premises data from an on-premises desktop that was sitting right beside the damn data. So of course it was faster. And they were like, yeah, well, I launched this Access, you know, 30 years old database and it works great. And I'm like, well, yeah. So that was the main reason, but they didn't of course they didn't understand. They just remembered the name like Horizon, and they remember, oh, it worked. And now they gave me this new WVD stuff and it sucks. And that was the reason why, you know, it sucked. That's when Microsoft came and said, well, Claudio, you know, you should start deploying on-premises session hosts for your users, managed by AVD. And you know you are going to lose some stuff, but at least you can have host pools with VMs that are on premises. And I'm like, oh, no shit. And then, of course, that solution works. The performance is there because now the VMs are, again, very close to the data. So that was the reason. It wasn't necessarily like feature set or better performance with whatever, you know. It was just the fact the data was right there besides the Horizon desktops, because everything was on-prem.
Yeah, what Claudio's talking about, if you don't know, he blogged about it, but it's basically if you install the AVD agent onto an on-premise VM, you'll register and the user can connect, but Microsoft say it's not officially supported, but it works, can't you, right, Claudio?
Yeah. First, they, you know, it wasn't even about saying it wasn't officially supported. The first thing they told me was like, we're going to kill you. We know where you live. So stop spreading that idea. So that was literally what I was told. And now they are, you know, telling the story I was telling like a year and a half ago. And it's funny because I have like my lab at home connected to GCP and AWS, and guess what? You can actually run, you know, the RD agents on hosts running on GCP and AWS, and it works great. But then, you know, it pisses Microsoft off because now, oh, Claudio, you are using the AVD control plane, you know, for free. You are stealing from us because you are running your workloads on a different cloud. Well, I'm not stealing anything from you. That's how you designed it, that, you know, the damn thing.
Yeah, I think Microsoft said it's basically a licensing issue, isn't it? Like Windows 10 multi-session is only licensed to run inside Azure.
That's the only one. Yeah. But everything else you can run anywhere. Yeah. Well, as of now, you know, maybe after this UK WVD user group presentation, they're going to change everything, the licensing, just to screw us. But that's a possibility.
Yeah. One more question, if you got time, from Rachel. What's the log analytics bill on a 5,500 AVD user deployment?
I didn't understand. What is the question?
What's the log analytics bill? Because obviously Rachel's done quite a bit of research, and obviously with Azure Virtual Desktop with log analytics, you get quite a lot of data, which can cost quite a bit of money.
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm not the one that handles that particular side. So I have to double check what I'm seeing and then get back to you guys.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely, again, there is no cheap, you know, no free lunch on Azure.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a presentation in a few weeks at the Virtual Expo on the real cost of running Azure in your environment. So it's hopefully I'll try and cover that some of that stuff off there as well.
Yeah, I know the numbers, like the overall numbers. Of course, there is a breakdown like log analytics and compute and storage and blah blah blah, like everything. But they were running like around, the last time I checked, like around 300K a month on the persistent side.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it buys you a lot of good stuff.
One more question, or do you need to go, Claudia? Because I know you said you had to shoot off it too. Are you okay for time?
I can take one more, yeah.
Okay, I think Brenda has got a question. He's got his hand up.
Hey guys, Claudio, thanks for the presentation. I'm enjoying it. So on the multi-session devices, did you run into any challenges regards CPU usage and applications spiking the CPU? And did you implement any throttling technologies or techniques to try and minimize the noisy neighbor syndrome?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So far, well, first of all, that's one of the reasons why we are limiting to 4 users per host. Even though you may look at the host and may say, oh, this is a big ass host in a certain way. Well, that's one of the reasons why we are only adding up to 4 users per host, to minimize the potential impact of anything that we may see. And of course, the security side of the house just adds extra, fat to the whole thing. But no, so far we haven't seen anything wrong. But again, could be the application set these people are using. That I will be honest with you, I don't even know, because again, I'm on the infrastructure side, making sure AVD is done properly. But when it gets down to the images, to even see what's there, I have no idea. So
Sure.
what I know as a fact is these applications don't seem to be problematic or like, CPU intensive or anything. And because of that and the size of the host, there was no need at the moment or so far to add any kind of like CPU, throttling products to the environment.
Just very quickly, following on from that, on those multi-session devices, as users start to log off and the user density reduces, was anything done to drain the remaining users to try and minimize or minimize the costs?
Well, the only thing that is done is, we can't kick users, off the server, of course, but we try as much as we can to do things like, okay, for how long is this user, has been sitting idle? If he's idle for whatever, then I'm assuming he's not working, and then I'll boot him out of the server, and then I'll keep his session, disconnected for a bit. And if it doesn't reconnect after he got the first boot, then he's gonna get a second boot after a while. If he doesn't come back, it means he's not working. And then when we get down to like no users, yes, then the server goes down.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Well, okay, guys. Unfortunately, I cannot answer more questions right now, but I will definitely take on the questions, Neil. Like, just get the questions from the attendees. Send me an email, or you guys, you have my email on the screen. Feel free to email me directly, and I'll get back to you.
Cool. Awesome. It's been amazing as always, Claudio. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Awesome, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Right. As I mentioned, we're going to do a few things. So what I'm going to do now, I'll do the beginning as normally do. So we had to do that just went around because Claudio essentially needed to go. So let me just open. I'm going to fly through this because I know we're getting up for time a bit, and Ryan's up next doing sort of Windows 365 performance. So that's another really interesting product. So let me just open up my presentation. I'm basically just going to fly through the news. So let me just get that. User group. Yeah. September. Right, here we go. Second. Open. Okay, for that, right. Okay. Right, let's say I'm going to really go quick through this. So the agenda we need to know. So next up, we've got Ryan. He's going to talk about sort of performance and optimization. Obviously, you just hit Claudio. Again, I'm just going to, most of these I've seen this before, so I'll go fly through them. Right, so I'll just go to the news. It's literally going to take me 5 minutes, and then Ryan can get started. So we're just going to look at what's new with Azure Virtual Desktop news this month. So virtual desktop community, so the WD community, where this is derived from, we're basically relaunching that as the virtual desktops community, where we're going to cover a lot more than Azure Virtual Desktop. It's going to be more about sort of DAS, Azure, AVD, MEM, and Windows 365. So we literally been sorting out all the logos and stuff today. So hopefully by the time we're up and running next month, we're going to have full site up and running, and then article stuff. So we're doing a lot of guest blogs. We're doing weekly members of the month. We're going to do YouTube videos. We're going to do lots more stuff. So if you want to get involved, reach out to me, because we're having guest blogs and stuff like that as well. But we want it to be like the central place for DAS, not just AVD, but other stuff as well in the future. So I'm really, really excited about what we're going to do that in the future. Nodio, as we just talked about during that presentation, we just released version 3.1 of our Nodio Manager for Enterprise. So we've got full support for Windows 11, Azure AD Join, host pool active DR, which we discussed during the presentation, multiple auto-scale enhancements to make it even better, 32 gig OS disk support, and much, much more as well. So if you're interested in using Nodio, reach out to myself or have a look at the release notes. AVD Tech Fest is happening in a few weeks' time. I think it's been, is it a few months now? Quite actually, I've not got the date now, have I? Pretty sure it's in a few months, so have a look at that. Get signed up if you want to represent. That's going to be really, I think there's like 2,000 people last time, so really, really good session to go to. So check that out if you want to. AVD Multimedia Redirection has been launched. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but this is really, really good. People who know Citrix have had that for years, but it basically offloads all the multimedia onto your local host, so any sort of video content you're doing. So it massively increases your host density. So if you're using a lot of sort of video and audio within your environments, people watching multimedia e-training videos or watching YouTube videos but not supposed to be doing, this will massively help the performance of your AVD host. So definitely check that out. Dead easy to set up. You just install a client locally and on your sort of AVD host as well. It only works with YouTube out of the box, but then you can enable it for all hosts quite easily, and you can also configure it via group policy as well. So definitely check it out if you're interested in increased performance of your hosts. Windows 11's preview is now available on Azure Virtual Desktop. So I've actually tried that out myself. Works really, really well. FS Logic works out of the box. Teams seems to work okay. So if you, I mean, now I don't know if you know, but the release date for Windows 11 has been for October the 5th, I think it is, off the top of my head. So and they're also going to be releasing the same date for Windows 365 as well. So that's going to go GA. So get ready, get testing. So really, really excited about looking for that one as well. Capture protection is now GA. This seems to have gone into public preview, sorry, for seems like forever. So that's now GA. So enable it on your host pools and you get supported by Microsoft. So again, really, really good security feature if you're worried about security in your environment. And we've got public preview of the AVD sort of classic to ARM. Again, that seems to be taking forever to do. I think that was like announced like a year ago or something crazy. So if you're on sort of AVD Classic and you want to get over to ARM, you can run that. Just a set of PowerShell scripts that you run in your environment. Shameless plug as well. We do it using Nodio. Click the button. But otherwise, you need to go in there, make sure you've got permissions, and make sure you do all the correct. There's a couple of steps that you need to do to get in there. And that's it for this month. So been a pretty busy month news-wise, and some really, really exciting releases. So let's see if we can get the same thing for next month. Right, we're done. So we're a bit limited some time. So Ryan, are you there?
What would you do if I didn't answer?
I'd just say go home. Finished.
Cool. So yeah, you didn't need to rush, but it's fine. So hopefully I'll try and not make this monotone, boring, because we're going to go through quite a few stats. So hopefully I'm probably going to surprise a few people tonight. And I'm also going to be talking about performance, Intel, AMD, Gen 1, Gen 2, Cloud PC. And I know that some people spoke about, or Claudio spoke about kind of sizing. This is probably going to turn it on its head slightly, and the world of cloud becomes complicated because every single deployment, every single tenant will give different results. And I'm sure that everybody who's seen Login VSI before in action can very much tell you the same thing. So just to kind of share my screen and get started. I think it's this one. Yep. You should be able to see that. So what we're going to be talking about tonight, and I'll try and keep it interesting, is we're going to talk about performance optimization and benchmarking. This can be applied to physical, virtual, VMware, Citrix, Owingu, Parallels, you name it. You can take these principles and apply them in cloud and on-premise and virtual environments. So feel free to take full benefit of what this offers. So basically, we're going to talk about the various kind of differences and issues associated with that. Anyway, getting started. So tonight I'm not going to start off with look how good I am and all the things I've done. I'm going to kind of talk about a little bit about me. So just a bit of familiarization. I'm not just a person who sits a robot behind the screen. I'm also a human being, and some of the hobbies I get into outside of playing around with enterprise systems and VDI is family, which is a very big part of my life. Cars, obsessed with cars. We want to talk about cars outside of this. When we start getting physical events again, I've got all the time in the world, changing discs, brakes, engines, servicing fuel filters, you name it. Everything apart from anything to do with drive chain, I get it my hands on. You might notice there's a rank slide and a medal at the top in the middle. I used to be in the military, and I have unfortunately had the experience of serving in Afghanistan. So I have quite a lot of stories from my military days as well. That is just a kind of quick insight. You'll probably notice the home office and the video gaming there. I do like PC games, so if you ever want to get me on Discord, let me know. But yeah, that's just an insight into me and my personal life. And if you want to know about me professionally, you can see it really quickly. Look at LinkedIn. Desktop virtualization newsletter. So a month or so ago now, I decided to put together a kind of a desktop virtualization across the board, all things, anything to do with MEM, PCs, desktops, Windows 11, Windows 10, and try and centralize that kind of content. And there's no kind of single limit. If that content's produced within 1 or 2 weeks, it will be captured and put into here for you all to see. You can subscribe, and it's also published out on my social media channels if you want to get hold of it. And it's all community driven with a little bit of industry news. If it's, industry news, which is kind of, I don't know, clickbait type of stuff, it won't be published. But if it's genuine news outside of the community, we will share it because it's beneficial to the community. And if you want something specific adding to let me know. I can add that as well. But that's the newsletter. So, agenda for this evening. So we're going to be talking about an introduction into the performance benchmarking for both Azure Virtual Desktop and Cloud PC. And obviously, I'm going to be taking some of the experience I've attained over the years of fighting with EUC environments and wrestling with the challenges associated in there. What is it? We're also going to look at what it means when people say optimize your image, because optimization is such a big word, right? If you go and look at it in dictionary, optimize, there's a few different meanings for it. So we need to kind of look at that and understand what we're actually dealing with in terms of optimizing an actual operating system image. When we look at some of the optimization tools out there as well, we'll talk about a few, and I'll show you one which is my favorite. I'm not biased, it's just generally is my favorite tool, but I'm not going to tell you yet. Well, I'll tell you in the session. We're going to look at Gen 1 VMs and Gen 2 VMs, so Generation 1 and Generation 2 in Azure. That's what we're looking at. We're also going to look at optimized versus non-optimized. What is the real difference? And I'm going to shock you all with Intel versus AMD. And I have to say, I started off an AMD Duron many years ago, and I did Intel for a few years, and I've gone back to AMD because I genuinely believe AMD gives me better experiences. And this slide deck is non-biased. The information I've shown is real testing. So you can make your own decisions, but you'll be pleasantly surprised, maybe not so pleasantly surprised. And then we'll finish off with summary and any questions you want to ask regarding your environments, any recommendations I could possibly give you during this community session. So let's get started. So I've got a big shout out to UL, PC Mark 10, because I've used this tool as the benchmark today. There's other tools out there. But today we are focusing using this tool to kind of get some of the stats, and we're going to be looking at application launch times. We're going to look at applications like Office and Excel, and some of the kind of general system operations which it captures using its system info monitoring service. And it goes back to the beginning. So a lot of people who are moving into the role of delivering AVD, or they've been given the problem of deploying an Azure virtual desktop environment. So you might have been working, I don't know, in the desktop or server department. The next minute someone sticks, a business case on your desk and says, guess what? You're building a new AVD environment. So can you just power it all on, spin it all up and turn it on and make sure it works? Yeah, you can, but will you get the best out of the money you've spent in doing all of that? The answer is probably not. So we're going to explore some of the things we should be doing around the image side tonight, and some of the kind of resources, configurations, and the consequences if you don't. UAT, I love this in applications, never mind actual infrastructure implementations. Here's on the left-hand side, you've got the client needs, requirements, designs, and implementation, right? Everybody's got that. And then you look on the right-hand side, we've got the UAT bit, where we've got acceptance testing, which matches the client needs. So does the client needs meet the acceptance testing? Does the requirements meet the system testing? And does the designs and integration, the designs meet the integration testing as any kind of third party, any kind of connectivity? And finally, implementation, unit testing, which is basically a development term, programmable code term, where you test a specific function to make sure it works correctly. Obviously, unit testing should still be applied when you are testing an AVD or Cloud PC environment you have configured and deployed. So that is just to kind of give you a bit of a highlight there on that one. And how many businesses complete an in-depth UAT testing model? And why am I asking this question? As in, how many people just flick a few buttons, turn it all on and go, there's your AVD environment? How do the others look at it from a cost perspective, look at resources, and benchmark to ensure that everything is running correctly? I don't think there's that many. So, and just to go back, and I am a little bit opposite to what Claudio says. That's just a matter of life. Everybody's got opinions. And like someone else I know called Steve Horn says, opinions are like arseholes, unfortunately. Everybody's got one. So everybody's got a different view on these things. And I'm a pro cloud person, especially when it comes to kind of elastic scale. What used to take months and years now takes minutes. However, we cannot guarantee, a specific performance baseline, unfortunately. We just can't, because the variation of different resources in these cloud data centers is different. It's just life. So you've got to remember that. So remember, resource contention is different. You might be sharing a Hyper-V host, which is in Azure, which other people are using, and it might come under stress and pressure, which impacts your environment. There's nothing you can do about that, because that physical hardware is managed by Microsoft in their Azure data center. Sorry, not what we can do. So we need to really understand what we're going to do here and have some backup plans. And does the difference, does the performance differ? Is there a difference between performance on the same VM specs? And I've kindly already answered that in the same line. Yes, believe it or not, from what I'll show you today, is the performance specs do differ and can vary from day to day. And then also, this is the big one, Intel versus AMD, some differences, and that's to be continued in this session. We'll then talk about cloud as fast as on-premise or on a physical desktop or a VM desktop, so that we're still using virtual machines. We're going to look into that slightly, briefly. And then finally, IOPS. Do IOPS matter? Disks, in my view, are everything, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail too. Okay, so it's 28 minutes past 7. Optimization. We're going to look at, in the optimization element, performance versus condensed consolidation, more bang for buck. So what do we mean when we talk about optimization? Are we talking about performance? Are we talking about performance acceleration? Are we talking about, getting more people onto a host? Are we trying to kind of, bang for buck, get more money out of our IT resources? And effectively, some get confused. They think by optimizing, they are adding benefits to the speed of the operating system. Sometimes when you start turning things off, you reduce the number of threads which are running on that operating system, processes running on that operating system as well. which allows you to run more users because the less number of processes is naturally better for the operating system. In terms of UX experience, when you start turning things off, some of the fancy slick features, smooth scrolling, all that disappears. So the user does get a jaded, a distorted experience. It becomes the visual features become less and less. And depending on your users and the expected user experience, that can go either way. We could have happy customers because you're saving loads of money, or the users who are actually using the devices every day, say the spreadsheets are that grainy, they can't work, and they need to buy, 4 inches of glass to see through a set of glasses. So it all depends on the business and what the actual objectives are. Just remember, performance versus consolidation are two different things. They all come under the optimization bracket. It just depends what you're trying to achieve within your organization. You can tell I've done this before, right? So applications, obviously being a CTO of an applications company, packaging company that is, I've got to throw this one in. So what about them? Well, applications are interesting because they're all very much different. They're all run as processes, most of them, or services, and they, as an application, they can demand lots of disk. They can demand small amounts of disk. They can demand lots of RAM, small amounts of RAM. They can demand lots of CPU or small amounts of CPU. Or they can do all three at the same time and lock you out. And I believe this was mentioned shortly, not long ago on this same call, where there were like resource limitation to prevent, one user sapping, Google Chrome is a good example, sapping the resources of a machine so the others can't use. And effectively what happens is you get the black screen of death, the performance reaches 80-90%, and no one can use that session host. So people have to log out, stop draining and move people over and balance things out. Or you can put limited restrictions on that specific application so that it doesn't creep. However, not all applications have memory leaks and problems like that. Sometimes it all boils down to making sure you've optimized and configured, allocate the right resource for your applications. What I mean by that is, did you know that the disk I/O and the disk speed is one of the most important parts of an application? Because if you just stick with standard IOPS and you've got lots of users launching multiple versions of that application or multiple copies of that application or multi-session environment, will that have an impact? And the answer is yes. And inferior disks are fantastic, and I do have, here's one I made earlier, in the background, but it does have its limitations at some point, depending on the number of users you want to get onto that. So that's just a bit of food for thought there. There's not, again, it's not just about turning something on. You need to understand your environment. And there is things like Azure Migrate and Lakeside, Systrack, and other products out there where you can assess. I believe things like ControlUp can also take a look at your applications, etc., to kind of give you a bit of an insight into the resource utilization. And Apps to Digital is another one. So there you go, I've named a few. So different types of optimization out there. So if you go back to the time when we were actually dealing with lots of physical tin, it was like, you spend 4 days in the server room and we'd actually call it a gym because we're racking lots of equipment and storage, networking, fiber cables, you name it. And we're configuring the networking, the power, all that kind of jazz. And then when we've got all that kit racked and powered on, we've got to then install the operating systems. We've then got to link it to the network, join all that kind of stuff, which we do in the cloud environment. But there's that extra layer of physical to sort out first, Once we've done all that, then we have to go through and optimize these machines. And the machines can be, optimized in various different methods. For example, with Hyper-V, some may realize if you're using 1 gig copper cable connectivity, effectively you need to make sure you configure VM queuing correctly, turn it off effectively on the cards to stop any issues. If you want high performance out of each box, you need to customize the power settings so that you're not on balanced or energy saving mode. And you also need to configure the network cards to make sure that they don't go to sleep, because if you go to sleep, it could cause application problems and people can't remote connect into them as well. So there's all these different types of optimizations out there. But specifically, let's focus on, user experience, services and processes running on the operating system. Yeah, let's look at them really today. So my favorite tool is the VMware OS optimization tool, which is a fling. And the reason why I like it is because I'm going to give you now a demo of it. But effectively, this gives us a nice little wizard and things. We can add our own custom templates. You can take login VSI templates, and you can build your own, which I'm going to cover briefly in a minute. But yeah, so if you want to kind of optimize your operating system, there's ones which are provided in GitHub by Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, as you can see, and all the others out there. So, and you can even some of the community scripts where people have made customs, which will work better for them. Cool. So that is the first bit, and we're just going to kind of wake up the machine, and we're going to go and have a look at the optimization stuff. If it's even in here. So I'm just going to load up. This is a blank machine. Here's one I made earlier. And effectively, I'm just going to launch the optimization tool. I like this because there's a few things we can do, and you'll see why I like it in a minute, because you don't really, I'm not going to snapshot, and there's a reason why I don't snapshot. So up here, you got templates, and obviously there's one just there. You can then go into the template section and import and add, or you can customize and create your own under templates, that is. You can copy and things like that. You know, there's all sorts of things you can do. So just bear that in mind. You're not kind of tied to this baseline. You can build your own if you wish. And there's all sorts of things we can take in, take out. If you open them up, look at color settings, you can add more. If there's specific things you want to install and configure as a part of the process, I don't know, like AVD redirect for Teams, you can bake these into this template. So it's a one-trick pony when you're doing the templating. So going back to the optimization bit, obviously it gives you a bit of system information. This is obviously not the cloud, this is local, but still works the same way. If I go and click at analyze, it'll basically run through the template and assess some of the things which we can configure. And there's all sorts from profile, network storage, tools, you name it. VMware tools, if you're not using them, you can turn them off. So yeah, you can customize all that and go through that. You can then export the results. So I'm just going to save them to the desktop. And now what I've got is, I love a bit of change control and documentation. I now have a IE. That will not happen in Windows 11, will it? If everybody wanted IE 11, it's gone. I tried to break it, but yeah, they're not playing. Microsoft, they said it's gone. So you've got a nice little bit of documentation here, just tell you what's not been configured yet and what you could configure. And that's great to go into your documentation systems in your organization. So I've done that. I can see up here the analysis is complete, and it says there's 427 total optimizations which can be applied to this machine based on the template set. Okay, and then we've got a recommended is 413, and as you can see the 14 are there. And obviously to apply that, you will just click the optimize. But before I go and optimize it, what you can see is you can do some kind of different settings, really good for applications and stuff in here. If you're doing packaging and stuff, or you've just installed your apps, you can basically do NGen. I know Neil will remember Citrix layering, or Unidesk as I remember it fully. Probably cursing now in the background he is. You can do all these kind of cleanups and stuff to fix DLL caches, etc. You can basically do the Windows Update stuff in here as well, so it's taking care of a lot more than what we thought. The cool thing as well is you've got the generalize as well, so the sys prepping capabilities, and we've got the history, which I'll come back to. Yeah, I hate Citrix app layering in capital, shouting much. Yeah, so basically you can restore back and roll back if you make a change. This is why I really like this optimization tool, because you don't have to go to snapshots. You make a boo-boo and it doesn't work, you can very quickly roll back. So test and roll back. So getting into it and just clicking optimize, just based on the recommended, the 413, I'm just going to run them now, and that will do its thing. I'm not going to reboot either today, just because it's obviously a demo. But effectively, it'll apply all these optimizations. And what will happen when it's applying these optimizations and you've done the reboot, you will notice afterwards that the threads and the handles will be much less, including the processes. So these will reduce down, right? So these will reduce because we're turning things off. That doesn't improve performance. It actually could hamper user experience performance and application performance because we're turning services off, indexing, and some of these things which make the UI snappy and the experience for the user pretty slick. And that's obviously one to remember as we're waiting for that. It is. So just to recap while we're waiting for this progress bar again, which everybody who knows is probably 50% of your career waiting for progress bars. is once we're done, we can then take another documentation out. We can import, export as well, and we can do a compare and contrast between the two different optimizations. And once we're done as well, I'll show you that we can roll back, because let's say we made a mistake, we can revert them changes we have made. And as we're waiting for this 20% to complete, you now have an opportunity to ask a question or questions if there's any so far. No, we're still good. Brilliant. So here you can see we've optimized. We've run this the 413 optimizations, but it's broke the operating system and we're not happy about it. So I'm going to roll back. And guess what? We roll back. Holy moly, how easy is that, right? And you can see it adds the rollback in there, so you've got a history, a timeline of what's been done. What more do you want in life? And there you go. Voila. So that's just a brief demo of the optimization tool. I hope that was an insight of what you can do. I'm not going to teach you how to break things today. I'm sure you'll all be playing around with these if you weren't aware of VMware's optimization tool. I'm not biased. I do love VMware. I love the products, but at the same time, this benefits multiple different platforms. Okay, we did that bit. Thank gosh. Over to the next bit. So, some stats. I hope you got your reading glasses on. So, does optimizing improve performance? Okay, so what we've got is, so the PC VM, which is in gray, is not optimized. And also, just to add salt to the wounds, the further the bar is, the worse the performance is. Okay, so remember that first. If the bar's out up here, it's worse. If it's closer to the actual label, it's better. And as you can see, the table's down here to notate that. Right, so this PC, I've got 128 gig of RAM. It's a Ryzen 9 900X, you know, super duper. It's got an overclocked CPU, all the toys, and it's got NV SSDs. However, compared to the cloud VMs, it's slower. Get that? Say what? So, VM to VM, this is test, and it's a Gen 2 VM, not a Gen 1. Holy moly, right? So, looking at the orange, which is after optimization, is slightly better, only slightly. So we've not achieved anything really under a cold start of the application Firefox. If you look, it's not even a second, it's a couple of milliseconds. So the Chrome, I'll PDF the slide deck and share it later as well, because I know you'll all want to read this. It's this is like one of the most useful things in the industry. It took me a long time to produce this data, but obviously as it's been a session, this is community stuff, and I'm happy for you all to see it. So if you do struggle with reading this, I'll make sure that the PDF for the slide deck is shared later. Again, look here. What is going on? It's crazy, right? So before, you know, and then if you're looking at all of this, they're all the same. So orange wins. So optimization in this scenario comes out on top. Yeah? Everybody agree on that? Brilliant. So here we go. There's always some sarcastic person on the call. Sit closer to the monitor. Moving on. So that's just an insight. But what we want to do now is, after crunching so much data, I did quite a few tests. I based it on the AMD and Intel version of 4 CPU, 16 gig of RAM. I've not gone and done loads because time permitting and all the rest of it, but the results are pretty much the same. So when we look at benchmarking, what does benchmarking mean? Roll VT. So when we're doing a benchmark, this is actually a VM in Azure with inferior disks associated to it. So you know you can't stop it and restart it and stuff. Every time you restart the VM, it will basically reset disks. So this was mentioned by Neil and your man earlier, and this is an Intel VM. But what you can see here, and these metrics are pretty poor, I'll have you know, for inferior, is the boot up, the cold boot up for the writing application, which is it's basically the Linux, what do you call it, LibreOffice is where it launches, and you can see some of that, the Chromium. These are slow. These are really bad. These launch times are terrible. So using inferior disks, people say you get better performance. In some cases, but after a certain point, you're not going to get the same experience as you would do by using a premium SSD. So depending on the use case, depending on your applications, guys, make sure you check this, because if you've not got the right disk, you'd have major problems. You know, spreadsheet scores, calculations, you know, recalculations, all this jazz. Important to kind of take note of. So this is Emferial, and this is the kind of test results we did, and you can see there. So what benchmarking effectively is we're running some essential tests, which is basically warm start, cold start of applications. A warm start is quicker because it's effectively already cached the application in memory. That's why it's warm start. Cold start is it's always writing to memory first. I'm teaching a lot of you to suck eggs here, but it's always good to kind of go over the basics. And then obviously you can see in the web browser section as well, it's doing all of this. The testing I did not only includes this, I call it basic testing and productivity testing. I've actually done Office apps as well. So what you're going to see from the results I'm going to show you in a minute is the Office application stuff as well. So enjoy, because this is quite important. So what have I tested? So AMD, Intel, Gen 1, Gen 2, before and after optimization, and a VM on a gaming PC. So these stats here, all different variants, cover various different tests I completed. It took me probably about a day to complete this in my own time, long evenings as well as other things. But like I said, progress bars are the beauty of being able to do other jobs while you're running these tests. So let's have a look at AMD. AMD Gen 1 results. You can see here, after is faster. Look at this before. Look at the difference there in Chrome. And then you've got, again, so you can see that the after tests are faster than the before, right? Which was expected. Only slightly, but it's good to know that you're not doing all of this in vain. That's probably the most important thing to kind of take away from this slide. Then when we look at AMD Gen 2, right, take a note of this. So Firefox cold start 1.55, yeah? 1.6, 1.2, 1.2. So there is on the Firefox a reduction using Gen 2. Yeah? So we can see now that we've got a slight reduction and the performance is much better. You can still see here that the Gen 2, the PC, is slower than cloud. Say what? So all of this physical, not even being shared anywhere else, is slower than using a cloud PC, AVD, you name it. It's the same. What's going on? And then before, again, is also still slower. After has its minor benefit. You know, the cold kind of start is also, you know, naturally it's going to be slightly faster because the disks probably are faster. But apart from that, what we're seeing here is that optimization does have a play. But if I just look at this one here, and we'll look at I don't know, GIMP cold start, we're seeing on after optimization on Gen 2 3.191. We go back one. So that's 3.19. So we're saying Gen 1's faster than Gen 2. Sorry? Yeah, I am. So what we're seeing here is actually using Gen 2 can be slower than using Gen 1. Anybody want to elaborate on that? Anybody confused? Because I certainly am. Don't make sense, does it? However, I did say before.
Did you have any of these security features turned on though? Because obviously with Gen 2 things, you get like the BitLocker and the sort of UEFI badge and all that stuff. No?
All of it turned off. Yeah, I wasn't going to, because I was obviously previously trying to hack my own OS. Remember that with many kits. Anyway, but no, yeah, off. Everything turned off, right? So maybe when you turn it all on, it improves it, but unlikely. So the only explanation we've got is, like I said before, and I think Login VSI have mentioned this in the past, is that you don't always get the same kind of specs despite wanting that. But I'm seeing Gen 1 and Gen 2 completely different. Nerdio needs some optimization testing tooling, clearly, to help with this. So when people select, they make a kind of an informed decision. I think that'd be cool, Neil. So that's quite crazy. Yeah, just putting a feature request in there. And then when we look at Gen 1 and Gen 2 in summary, as you can see here, I've just done befores just to keep it simple, but we can see before, and that's a Gen 1. Test 1 is 1 and Test 2 is 2, so Gen 1 and Gen 2. As we can see, blue is Gen 1, 2 is Gen... So on Essentials, we're seeing that Gen 2 is much faster. On productivity, we're seeing Gen 1's faster. On Word, Microsoft Word, Gen 1's faster. On Excel, Gen 1's faster. On PowerPoint, Gen 2's faster. And on Microsoft Edge, Gen 1 is slightly faster. Now, that is a mixed bag, right? Mixed bag. But that's still AMD, same architecture, same sizing spec, just basically 2 different VMs. Same disk sizing, everything is exactly the same, exact same tenant, exact same region. So yeah, point to note, everybody, you mixed bag. Okay, now we're going to talk about Intel Gen 1. So after and before, again, as you can see, the after is better than the before, which makes sense. Yeah, but it's much better than AMD. In AMD, there isn't much difference between them. So we can see that AMD doesn't really benefit that much from optimization, whereas Intel seems to, especially on Gen 1, seems to definitely benefit from it. And then Gen 2, when we're looking at Gen 2, we're seeing, again, the after is much better than the before on all of it. In comparison, what we are seeing in totals is Gen 2, in most cases, comes out on top, but there is like Word, productivity testing, and PowerPoint are still questionable. AMD versus Intel. Say what? So when I put the AMD and the Intel results together, we're just doing Gen 2 here because we're cool. So it's Gen 2 only we're looking at here. So when we look at them, what we're seeing is AMD is coming out on trumps against Intel. And we've already known this, and I've known this a while because I did the test over a year ago, and we proved this before. But this obviously puts into context that nothing's changed. Intel is still not as good as the AMD. And this is the same CPU spec, so the pricing is exactly the same as well. There's no difference in cost. There's a difference in performance, but no difference in cost when you actually use these. And look at this here. So after optimization, it is peaking much higher, and that's Excel. So Excel does require more resources, and it does more computing and things like that. So it's quite important. So you can see that's coming out on top. But when we look at things like, PowerPoint and Edge, still above the grade. So Edge is better. Essentials, you can see AMD wins every single time. And these results are exactly the same what we've seen on Cloud PC. So does it really matter being Gen 1, Gen 2? Not always. Does optimization matter? Yes. Interesting stuff, right? And then when we look at the Cloud PC, when I take all 3 specs, so we take the 4, 8, and 16, as you can see, there wasn't much difference in them. I don't know if this is because it's the test ones, the trial ones, but we weren't able to kind of get anything different. But the specs were pretty good in most cases. But again, it was a trial, so until we get off the trial and go into a more serious kind of testing, which I will come back and do in more detail, what I'm seeing at the moment is AVD and Cloud PC specs are pretty much coming out the same. So point to note then is obviously AMD versus Intel. AMD wins. Gen 1 versus Gen 2 is still undetermined, unknown, with something we still need to look at. So that kind of brings us to near the end. So an introduction. So what we did today, what I've covered briefly, is an introduction to the topic of optimization. Talked about, the differences between performance and consolidation, condensing, squeezing things into a can. We also discussed cloud pros and cons. We can't control, but the elasticity, the scalability is very much what we all want, because we can sit in our bedrooms or on our iPad and start spinning up resources if we need them. The optimization tools, I covered some of the other ones out in the market, but I predominantly focused on VMware optimization tool and demoed that. I also spoke about you know, do they offer significant results, and shared the results from some of the testing I did, and then the cloud comparative. But there isn't one because the results are pretty much the same as the AVD. So you're still getting the same images, the same performance, just one's paid monthly on a consumption basis and the other is paid as a set cost per user. So that kind of summarizes them interesting points. Any questions? And while I'm waiting for questions, further reading material is in the deck as well if you want to read some of the books and stuff I produced, which are free for the community. If anybody's left, that is because I sent everybody to sleep, right?
No, we've got one comment from Rachel. She's saying Tron's going to be sharing some information on the virtual Let's Go. What you mentioned about your sort of CPU specs getting changed when rebooting. I guess that kind of could explain what you're seeing, right? Because obviously these.
That's exactly what I saw.
Yeah. Did you note down the actual VM, the CPU spec between tests and stuff?
I do have them all recorded, yeah, but I think I might have blown away the test bed. I can do it again and replicate that, but I do get all the different CPUs from there. I mean, it uses, I think, the CPU Z in PC Mac to kind of capture them. So I could run the test again and basically pull that together for you. But yeah, I found that was the big one. But what really threw me was, you know, everybody's been wanting Gen 2, but the secret is Gen 2 offers no benefit, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gen 2 is obviously, I mean, Microsoft say it's better performance, but the main benefits which we're going to see in Windows 11 are these security stuff, obviously, because you get virtual TPM chips and BitLocker protection and all that stuff, right? That's going to be the way going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's basically which I think you nailed it, Neil. I think that was the kind of moneymaker here. Is if you want Gen 2, the purpose of Gen 2 today, from what I've tested, is all the security benefits, you know, for like the trusted TPM, all that kind of good stuff. Because at the moment, from my testing, might be wrong, but yeah, not seeing it.
Yeah. Cool. Just got one question from Andrew. What's the benefit in investing more in optimization versus cost savings?
Well, it depends. How many do you want to get more people on small and shorter number of boxes, or do you want to optimize for better performance for the user experience? I've worked with legal and financial firms who have paid more money to kind of burn more resource so that their users have a better experience rather than trying to consolidate them. Whereas other organizations have paid less money, or they've basically stripped out 10, 15 physical units, physical hosts, because they want to repurpose them for a new project because they've saved. So it depends on the organization, I think, Neil. A lot of organizations have their own way of thinking. Some are very much cash rich and just want the best for their customers, as in users. Others really want to kind of shave that money off that pound coin.
Yeah, absolutely. Okie doke. Any more questions for Ryan? I think we're nearly at time anyway.
I love Rachel's. Greta, I love you. Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, and then obviously if you want like QR codes, you can grab some of the books and stuff we produced, which kind of cover app management, disaster recovery, and deployment guides. I know Claudio mentioned VMware Horizon earlier. Nerdio need one, Neil. Nerdio need a book. You know where I am. No, I'm joking, but they need one.
It's actually been one of my ideas, actually, to do a complete sort of from start to finish, how to deploy a complete AVD environment using Nerdio, as in image management, host deployment, optimizations, all that kind of stuff. Because there's nothing out there like that, right? There's no book where you can take.
Everybody's using it. I know, because every customer I speak to has a Nerdio backplane at the moment, which is good, right?
Yeah, good for me. Cool. Right, I think we've had 2 hours of your time. Any more questions before we disappear? Nope. Okay, guys. Well, it's been really, really interesting information tonight. Really, really good sessions. Lots and lots of info. So we're still open for next month. I haven't got any presenters as of yet. So if you want to present, just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to to try and fit you in. All right, guys, we'll call it an evening, and we're going to upload this video to YouTube, so look out for that and share it if you need to or anything like that. So otherwise, I will see you next month. Cheers, guys. I'll end the meeting.
Thanks, Neil. Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks, Neil.
Cheers, guys.